Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Fireside Chat today. We are going to be talking all about the importance of creating candidate communities and how to build them. I am joined today by some special guests. I'm sure faces you are very familiar with. We have Lauren Jones, who is the founder of Leap Consulting. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to dive into this topic with you. We have Brindy Pickett, who is a vice president at Insight Global, and Brindy's focus is specifically on that consultant engagement side of the house after spending many years growing up through this industry. Brindy, welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
And then we have Todd Duclos, who is the vice president of marketing at Loyal Source. Each of these individuals have so much great experience in our industry that I'm actually going to have them individually introduce themselves because there's so much just cool insight there. When we were prepping for this conversation, I thought that would be helpful for each of you to hear. But before we do that, to give a quick rundown of what we're going to cover today, in that idea of building candidate communities, we're going to hit it from a few different angles. One being how to approach this from culture, operations, marketing, technology. Quiet quitting is a phrase we're hearing everywhere right now. We're going to address that and really just kind of soup to nuts in between, how to create that great community, not only for the candidates, but also for your internal employees and just helping people stay engaged. So with that, Lauren, will you take it away and give us an introduction of yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I am tickled to talk about this topic. I think it's really important. My name is Lauren Jones. I am the founder of Leap Consulting Solutions. I have been in the staffing and recruiting industry for, it will be 25 years in October. Yeah, I know, right? A quarter of a century. Doesn't make me sound old at all. But we focus on three primary industry issues at Leap Consulting. First is helping agencies really build a good, comprehensive stack or ecosystem. And then we help with business process change management, because you can't take a brand new system and apply old workflows or old practices to it and think it's going to be better, faster, stronger. So we help businesses really get efficient with their processes. And then we also help with adoption, which is a huge issue in our industry, regardless of the technology that you're using. So we help in all those areas. And again, I'm just tickled to be here. So thank you.
And in case you haven't seen it, I don't know where you've been if you haven't seen it, Lauren is one of the co-authors of Together We Rise, which is a really great collection of stories of really leading women in the staffing industry and challenges they've overcome and how they've come together to support one another and the industry. So shameless plug for Lauren.
Thank you. And go buy the book. It's on Amazon.
It is. Highly recommend.
I love it.
All right, Brindy, would you like to share your introduction next?
I'd love to. So I swear this is not planned, but I am also a fan of Together We Rise. And it's so timely to talk about it because it's about community and belonging. And I just in the last couple of years, I've experienced this big lift from connecting to other women in the industry. So, and I think that reading the book was a big part of that, because you just don't feel alone. You read that, you're like, I experienced that, others have. So thank you, Lauren, and your group for putting that out there. But me, so it's been a mixed bag for me at Insight Global. It's been about 16 years. Actually, this is the month of 16 years. So I've done a lot of things. Most recently, though, maybe I'll just focus on like the last handful of years, is I was a leader over a region and I was focused on sales, recruiting, client management. And then I went into one of the Insight Global brands that's called Evergreen. And so that was managed service practice. And so I dealt with project governance. Really, I was responsible for the success of the project, the outcomes of the project. And then after that, I went to consult engagement. That's been the last couple of years. And I'm very passionate about this. So thank you for pulling me in, Kelly, because I'm really thinking about how do we operationalize our values, and how do we turn those values into behavior that affects the consultant experience. And a big part of that is creating community and thinking about our relationship with work and how we can bring empathy to the workplace. So that's just very near and dear to my heart of how human-centered can we be.
I love that. And I really wanted to make sure Brindy was a part of this conversation because of, like she mentioned, Insight Global is a very significantly sized staffing industry organization, and there's so much they're doing, and they're really forward thinking about this. And so to be able to have everybody kind of learn and hear what an organization like this is doing, I think can be really impactful. Todd, one of my new favorite people, we recently met, and I'm so excited for you to be here. Can you share a bit more about your background?
Sure. I'm Todd Duclos, VP of Marketing, and I've been in the industry for about 20 years.
Nice.
I took a hiatus to go work with a fertilizer group to build a CRM out for them, but then got lured back into staffing. This is a very important topic for me, mainly because I've been out of work recently, like leading into COVID and around that time for that about a year and a half. I was probably out of work for a year of that. And it really showed me the problems with the general apply process, the way candidates are handled through that process, and just the way it becomes such a system instead of a human activity, where looking for a job should be a human activity. You should have some engagement with someone. You should have someone you're talking to, and the networking and the ability to communicate thing is very big for me. And so I've tried to bring that forward in my role now, and I look forward to talking about this as a result.
I love that. And Todd, in case someone on this listening to this is not familiar with your background, can you just share a couple of the other staffing groups that you've been with in the past? There are a lot of really familiar names.
Yeah, so I was started off at K-Force down in Tampa and lived there for 15 years. I then went over to Randstad and was their VP of Innovation and helped with the Monster acquisition. And then I went to Bullhorn and helped with their Salesforce side of the product line with their marketing alliance team. And then I worked for Optimy and Lucas Group in that period I was sort of referencing earlier. And then last December, I got hired at Loyal Source to help run marketing there. A large part of what I've done through the course of my career is really the intersection of technology and CRM. That while I have a degree in innovation and technology, the real value add that I bring to companies is that ability to sort of look at your business process and your CRM and technology stack and put that all together. So that's what Lauren and I have a lot in common with, is that idea. So we often just mimic each other.
There's a lot of really good best practices you guys are going to be able to learn from this conversation. I'm so excited. Lauren, Brindy, Todd, thank you so much for being here today. So why don't we go ahead and kick off formally our conversation about one key area that you are super passionate about and you'd love people to start ruminating on as it comes to building candidate communities. So whoever would like to jump in first, go for it. There's so much we could unpack in this topic. Oh, you guys are all being so polite. Okay, I'm going to pick somebody. Brindy, I'm going to pick you.
Gosh, there's so much to talk about. So the first thing that comes to mind is relationships can be a function of proximity. That can happen. And so there's just a host of a lot of unanswered questions when you think about the last 2 years. Your physical space, return to office. You think about like even mentorship relationships. You think about the communities that we talk about when communities could be virtual. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, of with all that change and that disruption, now that the dust is settling a little bit, where are we now? And now that there's much more empathy about this interwoven relationship with work and life. So I really don't believe there's a work-life balance anymore, thank goodness, because I think that's just a bit compartmentalizing. I think that there needs to be an interwoven relationship. So I think about a lot of that. And I guess I say that to say, how does that, in my mind and in staffing, we're at this intersection with a candidate, a consultant working. How do we bridge some of that communication gap? How do we advocate for others? How do we do that with intention? How do we do that consistently enough? One of my findings from doing a lot of just like feedback loops and just really listening much more than we've ever listened before is communication has been lacking in our industry. I dare say, I guess I'm thinking about what I see from Insight Global, but I think communication with intention is lacking. And how do we offer a lot more value? And I think that there's a way to do that with technology. I think technology can enable us to be, to offer that value. So I dumped a lot on y'all, but like, that's what
No,
I've been
I love
thinking, and
it.
it's
Was such a
loaded.
great kickoff point because there's a couple things, that communication with that intentionality, right? And we in the industry tend to think, more is better. When we were doing traditional job advertisements, right? Let's just go throw up on the internet, right? More is better. Apply all, like apply to all, post to all. That was a button I actually had to remove from my recruiters, right? Because we just have this incorrect belief that more is better, and intentional communication is the bud that will help flourish a community. And if COVID taught us anything, there are some meaningful consequences of the work from home, and that was, mental health. And Bert Bean is like all hail.
We just make a note in case anybody doesn't know who Bert Bean is. Bert Bean,
The CEO of
Yes.
Inside. Yes.
Courageous to be
The
very vulnerable about his challenges with anxiety.
Yes. And he's so open about that. When we have, and I'm the same way. I've been exceedingly open about mental health and anxiety and all of that. But what I think has been wonderful as a sort of consequence of COVID is the work-life integration, right? Where we're rethinking how work works, and no longer are people saying, okay, well, I'm going to work for 35 years and then finally retire and then finally enjoy life. People are saying, no, we have technology now that will enable us to enjoy our jobs and enjoy our lives. And so employers now need to be a part of that meaningful conversation to create intentionality with communication and community and getting input, consistent input, and changing the way that we do the whole review process. All of this technology is enabling us. And when I have a rule with automation, right? People on relationships, automation on repetition. And so this technology should allow us to maintain the human connection that is so necessary in this industry.
Oh, it's so true.
Because work is not about the individual. It's really about the group. And I've really discovered this the last handful of years, is to be purpose-led. You feel a lot different about your contributions when you know what you're going toward, and you know what your contributions are doing, and you have a community with you, because we're all relational beings. And I think that is so critical to underscore that, of like, are you having that enjoyment? Are you having that fulfillment? Because to Lauren's point, we're not just going to soldier through. That's kind of, I hope that is dead and gone, of I'm just going to soldier through. I'm going to put up with this to get the paycheck. I think that's the awakening, the great awakening that we've been through, is not to do that. Right.
Well, and we hear so much right now about quiet quitting. And from what I can tell, there's actually a couple definitions. One is more of we'll put it on the onus of apathy, right? Like, I don't know, I don't care that much. I'm going to put in the bare minimum and check out, whatever, get my paycheck. But the other definition, we'll call it, that I've started to see is more people saying, I want to invest in other areas of my life too. I'm going to do a good job, but I'm not going to work 60, 70 hours a week. Like, I can do a really good job within this core amount of time. So, Todd, I'd love to hear your thoughts on just this concept. I don't know if this is something you've been here buzzing around the industry as well.
Oh, without a doubt. I think quiet quitting to me is a clawback. I think if you look at this from a historical perspective, companies starting in like the 80s started this great job of adding more things to the workplace so you would stay longer. You got games, you got food, you got dry cleaning, you got all these things that would allow you to stay at the office and work longer. And that led to this, up until recently, this whole hustle culture of I can outlast you. I'm the last one to leave the parking lot. I'm the first one to come in. It was often, viewed at with such respect if that was what you were doing. And I think this quiet quitting is really just a clawback of that idea that to be successful, I need to be here that many hours and you need to see me doing this work. I think that what COVID and being at home showed people is that I can have a balance where I'm comfortable with my work and life and family and be a part of my family's life in a much greater and more impactful way. And so I don't think it's empathy about the work. I think it's more empathy towards their families and understanding that if I give that time now, it's more meaningful in the future and making that decision. And so to me, I think it's just sort of a PR kind of formatting in the opposite way of what companies have done to employees for years by saying work longer, work harder. The employees are just saying, I'm not going to do that anymore, but I'm still going to give you quality time while I'm there. It's just that I'm going to leave at 4 and it shouldn't reflect poorly on me as a result.
Sure. So that's more that second definition that I've been seeing, right? Of like, I'm still putting in the effort and I want to do good things for the company, but there's other priorities in my life that I'm not going to always push away. And Brindy, we've had conversations actually in our last Fireside Chat around just progress in the staffing industry and just this concept of like, yeah, kind of Todd, like what you mentioned, almost just like the hustle culture of like all the reward of like, okay, I'm putting in more time, but then you have to say no to someone somewhere. And Brindy, what you had said was so profound of you were finding yourself saying no consistently to your family. And you realize like, that's not the no I want to be using. Like, I want to be spending time there, even if it means setting up different types of parameters with work. Do you want to share more about that? I just thought that was so profound because it's hard. And when you're young in your career, you might not have that option, but as you get more seasoned, people see what you have done, the value you bring, right? You establish some of that credibility, but how can people apply that really for candidates across the board, would you say?
I have so many thoughts on this because I had an expiration date for my time at Insight Global. If you were to have asked me, just 5 years ago, because I was really just saying no to myself. I didn't really always bring my whole self to work, and I really glorified the grind. And I put this on myself where there was times where I would be asked to do something and I would begrudgingly say yes. And those were things that I felt undervalued about and I wouldn't feel fulfilled about doing. But then there was also activities where I would go above and beyond, back to the quiet quitting. And I would feel good about it because it was my choice and it was something that I enjoyed. And it was like a deposit into a relationship that kind of filled me up. And I guess I say that because I think quiet quitting has a lot to do with this inverse concept of quiet firing. I think that there's some bad leaders. I think there's some bad leaders out there. There's this layer of middle management that is so critical to success in an organization because those are the middle managers are the doers. They're the action people. They're the let me give you feedback real time with kind candor. They're the let me inspire you, let me paint the vision for you, or let me share the vision with you. And I think when I look back to that time that you were talking about, Kelly, I think certainly that was on me because I glorified the grind, but also I think there's this element of leadership there where a great leader doesn't quietly quit you, or maybe they give you a ton of activities and you don't have the resources and they don't check in with you. So I agree with Todd where I think there's this, and I'm feeling it because I'm, my oldest is 4. But this all happened to me before I even had a family where I kind of had some of that quiet quitting behavior because it was just my survival mechanism because I couldn't give more. Like I felt like I was giving so much of self. So now, yes, it is a lot more about saying yes to my family, but thank goodness I've conditioned myself the last few years to stop saying no to myself. But I think quiet quitting is a new term for an old problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree that that quiet quitting is, well, first and foremost, I think it's a result of burnout. I think there's we've spent the last couple years at home with Zoom consuming more and more of our time, and there's just Zoom fatigue and hours fatigue and people saying, enough, I'm going to set some boundaries that, I would like my employer to honor. And this hustle culture, glorifying the grind, I think that those days are sort of gone. And what people are like clamoring for is transparency. Part of this quiet quitting is I don't know where I'm going. What am I hustling towards?
Right. Sure.
Where's the hustle? Where's the finish line? Right. And I think what a lot of employers that are getting over this successfully are adding transparency, creating a culture where there's transparency and communication and what your career path might be, and that it doesn't have to be climbing the ladder one way, that we've talked about curriculum vitae, course of life. It is your course of life, not my course of life. And what we're looking for are employees that can articulate why they've made the choices that they've made. And but career pathing is an employer's, that could be some really good secret sauce to help create community, to help create connection,
Yes.
to help create clarity of where look at all those 3 C's.
I know, I was gonna say, preach it, Lauren.
I know, right? I love alliteration, by the way. Didn't even do it on purpose. But creating clarity of purpose. If you want to be connected to something, you got to know where you're going. And I think if the employers, like Salesforce has done a really great job of this, where there's clarity of career path. And I think the employers that can do that are going to organically have communities within their organization, are going to organically have people, to Brindy's point, coming to their employers or managers and saying, I am burnt out, or before they leave, and before they just up and quit, coming, and because you're creating a culture of connectedness and transparency on both sides.
Right. I just saw a post today and I wish I could remember the name of the individual. It was someone new in my feed. So if I can find him again, I'll tag him when this goes live. And it was just the concept of a sales individual in the staffing industry who had been put on a PIP. But he shared the story. This was like, I don't know, you guys may have seen it this morning too. It was just published. And it was the story he shared from a few years ago in his career. And he was experiencing some really challenging things in his life, just with anxiety, and had started out really strong in a sales function and then started to kind of slip and not hit his numbers. And it just kind of started snowballing. And his manager put on a performance plan, right? And set forth this target that no one had ever hit. And out of like anger is what he expressed. He just like blew through that target and blew through the next one and blew through the next one, blew through the next one. And then he quit because he's like, this is not like, nobody stopped to ask about me. And who knows, there's a lot of variables. And if you're a manager and you're trying to make sure that you have not only candidate engagement, but employee engagement, to what everybody's saying here, you have to find out what's important to them and what they're driving for. But if somebody had stopped and said, you were doing really good, and I think you have the skills to keep doing really good, how can I support you in being the best possible at your job? It might have given him the ability to be like, oh, I'm going to be vulnerable for a second. Life feels really stressful right now. And creating an environment where he could be a really successful salesperson for them instead of creating an animosity and leaving. And I would imagine a lot of times people don't buckle through and get better. People buckle through and it just starts to really implode under them. And so I think there's some really tangible ways, career planning that you can do for employees. But I also think that there's ways to apply that to the consultant side. If we think about it even though it's never a purely business vacuum, but if you try to think about it in a purely business vacuum, the goal of every staffing firm is to redeploy every consultant every single time. So I'd love to hear thoughts just about how to create that environment of transparency and inclusion and support for your candidate community when their current priority is to just find the next job, whether or not it's through your staffing firm.
I think
Yeah.
we could really,
I got it. We're all like this. We're all shaking back and forth. I've got it. Go ahead, Todd. You go.
So I just think that this is something that we're not good at in general in staffing. That every place I've worked, I've had the meeting where everyone sits in a room and they say, we're going to get better at redeployment. We're currently at 5% and it's low hanging fruit. And we're going to get to 11. And that means we'll have X millions of dollars more. The problem is it's not low hanging fruit because it's very challenging to determine when a consultant's about to end, whether they're going to be extended or let go early. There's lots of variables in that process that you have to align. And automation's allowing us to align those a lot better and get better at redeployment. But it's that view of it must be simple, so let's just do it and take care of it. And I think that that's the problem. What I've been preaching for my company is along the lines of corporate social responsibility, that people don't come to you anymore to just know what you do and what you provide. They want to know who you're helping and what is it that you're doing in your community and how does that all tie together. And so we have the fortunate advantage as a healthcare solutions company to be able to point to helping veterans and helping, refugees and helping children at the border and various other projects that we run that have an outside meaning. And it really allows us to connect with our main constituencies of clients, candidates, and employees. And it allows us to keep a standard messaging that we're a company that cares about community. And if you work with us, at the end of the day, you won't solely be measured by revenue. You'll be measured by how you help those communities. And the interesting thing to me is that staffing as an industry has always been far more inclusive of an industry than any other that I've worked in. In technology and other places, it's all old adult men who are running everything. And there's like the, woman of color who's in the DEI seat and the, man of color who's in the HR seat or whatever. There's sort of just little bits of that. But, even on this call, you can see the example of strong women leadership. And throughout my career in staffing, that's what I've seen is the ability for both male and females to move up at an equal rate within our industry is astounding. We just can't seem to allow our candidates to get away from what I call the Garanimal effect. And I'm old.
The what effect, Todd?
The
Garanimal. So Garanimals were a line of clothing that Sears created in like the 70s. And what you got to do as a kid was match your tiger shirt to your tiger pants.
Yep.
And it made it nice and simple. And staffing does that a lot. We take skill sets and say, you're this, you're a PM4, you're a PM5. And staffing's job isn't to promote people. It's their job to fill that particular need. And I think that as we go through this and continue to mature as companies and as an industry, we're going to have more say in that promotion and more say in that long-term availability to these consultants that will make redeployment seem like a foregone conclusion because you are leading people down a career path that's exciting to them and not having to switch a job every 2 years to get those monetary gains. The data is clear. You can make far more money switching jobs every 2 years. The problem is that at a certain point, you don't have enough continuity to get into the leadership side and into the bigger leader side. Whereas if you can show someone you can have both, we can make you more money and groom you as a future leader with our company by following our community guidelines and doing what we want to do as a company. I think that speaks to what we're getting at around candidate communities because they want more. They don't want to know it's just more widgets. They want to know I've impacted someone's life.
I love that.
Well, I think and community is about meeting the individual where they are, because some people don't want to go into a leadership position.
Right.
Some people don't want to have people reporting to them, really. And what we've done just a mediocre job is creating cultures of openness. And I mean, I did a study in my own backyard when I ran Northern California, and I lost out on an average of 31 days of revenue when we didn't have a redeployment practice in place, meaning at the 60-day mark, we began checking in 60, right. 45, 30, 15, whatever. But it was more not how we were communicating, but making it okay for the candidate to come back and going, I'm getting nervous. My assignment's going to end in 60 days. What do I do now? We clearly haven't done enough self-evaluation as organizations to understand why isn't that phone call being made? Right. And I got obsessive about figuring out why a candidate would go through all the trouble of getting hired by my organization, go out on assignment, and then not come back to me and say, I'm getting nervous. They'd just rather go ask a stranger agency, right? They just rather go elsewhere. So what does it say about the environment that we're creating or the culture that we're creating? We're not creating one of openness, clearly. And so how do we create and articulate, right? And I'll go back to Matt Fisher's comment at Gigi last year, since we're coming up on the year anniversary of Gigi, saying that digital marketing as a core competency will be the difference maker for agencies. And I will take it one step further and say digital marketing as a core competency internally and externally. So treating your internal people and external people like consumers, and giving them that omnichannel, meeting them where they are, whether they want to be a leader or don't want to be a leader, and being able to articulate with clarity what's in it for them, and what's in it. That messaging creates that openness and that culture that we want to create, the brand stickiness that we're looking for, to create community, because community is about connection and communication. Look at all those C's again. But that people are looking for that connectedness. You've got Jobcase. They've done a great job of creating, community for that hourly worker, and creating camaraderie where it's needed. And I mean, Art's keynote was all about connection and community. And so businesses have, I think, a responsibility. I'm going to call it a responsibility.
Yeah.
And quick note, Art Papa from
Art Pappas. I'm sorry. Art Pappas, CEO of Bullhorn.
Yes. Just in case people
and Matt Fisher is the OG CTO.
I like to add in the definition in case something's new to somebody. And it's also true. Like we think about clients, like in the marketing world, you think about clients and prospective clients as you have a buyer persona. Okay, what are we looking to accomplish as a business? We're looking to grow. Okay, well, how do we partner with the right people? Well, we have to get in the psychology of what matters to them. But why don't we do the same thing on the candidate side? Because at the end of the day, again, going back into that, we'll call it a business vacuum, which again doesn't fully exist, but if it did, you cannot be a growing staffing firm or a firm of any kind in this industry if you're not paying attention to what your candidates need. Because you could have the rec, but if you don't make the placement, this is how much revenue you have. So it's really important from a business standpoint, as well as just a human connection standpoint, to understand what they need. Brindy, I'd love to hear what your thoughts were as I had asked that original question.
I really related to what you were saying, Todd, about the how is the hard part. I think everybody understands the why. It's the how you do that. And I think a big part of the how that's difficult to execute on, but easy to say, is getting involved with the consultant's performance. Because when you feel like I'm validated, I'm seen, I'm doing well, I know where I stand here, there's a value alignment with where I want to go and who I am and where this organization's going. Or I just want to complete this assignment onto the next, because what Lauren's saying is true. Everybody has different wants and needs. So I think the how part is this consistent conversation about performance where you bridge that gap, because that often doesn't happen, because it's hard to say you're not performing well. That is really hard. It's really hard to say. And in the example you gave, Kelli, with the PIP, that I don't know exactly the details of that situation, but it sounds a little like I was talking about bad bosses before, where you're just like, oh, you're not doing well. Here's a performance plan. Let me not give you the resources to achieve it. And I'm just going to wait. Maybe that's how that happened, at least how I'm interpreting it. And so if you can actually get involved in that performance experience, and it's complicated, it's sticky, but then other factors will come into play. You have this life circumstance. You need more flexibility. I have to meet you here. Like all of those really challenging things will come out of that. But I think the crux of it is, are you involved in that? Because staffing can be very transactional. And I think we do as an industry focus on the bookends. Let me get you on site, and then let me help you at the exit. And you're not then doing justice. You're not honoring that responsibility to that experience for that particular consultant, because those are just 2 moments in time.
Right.
And what are you doing during the whole assignment to add value?
Right.
I'll say too
Believer in that, plow value into like middle of assignment.
Right.
I'll say too that I saw that from when I was outside of staffing, hiring developers and others to work for me, that by the end, they all worked for the same company. And I was like, well, why did that happen? And it's because that company had that focus on the middle that the other companies didn't have. And so as a result, whenever they said, oh my God, I can't get my recruiter, or I can't figure out what would happen with my paycheck, the other person would say, well, I can get mine on my app and I can get mine instantaneously. And I've never had that problem. And by the end, they're all working for the same company. And it's not by accident. It's because that company put a lot more thought in the customer journey than the ones that existed. And as we move away from having on-demand candidate access whenever we need them and move to a scarcity of talent, we're going to need to act like consumers and beg for their business. Otherwise, we're an intermediary that can be removed. And from an innovation standpoint, that's just fact. It's happened to Blockbuster. It's happened to the best companies in the world. They just get moved aside because they don't change with the times. And staffing is no different. And we really need to be more B2B, B2C like than B2B like. And I think for a long time, we were more worried about the brand and the ability to show the difference in the brand to the client than doing anything on the candidate side. And I think that as we rotate away from that and we see less spend on things like job boards and things that we traditionally spent a lot of money on in marketing, you'll see that shift towards more omni-channel B2C type communication. Customer journey will become a big part of what everyone is doing. And the best companies do that today. Adam Bleibtreu at AMN for years has used MailChimp before there was ever a customer journey to create a customer journey that he wanted to see. And they've beat estimates every year and their stock price has grown, exponentially every year because they understand that part of it ahead of everyone else. And the more that staffing companies come on board with the idea that we don't have full control anymore, we need to be more active in our relationship with our constituencies, the more that they'll adapt and become more powerful in what they do. Or the alternative is they'll shrink off, just like we're seeing with, stalwarts in the industry like Career Builder and Monster, who at one time owned huge percentage of revenue for people and now own a lot less because it's just not as relevant a purchase as it once was. And we all have to be wary of that.
Yeah. And if you think about, a marketing funnel or a sales funnel of any kind, you've got your pipeline at the top. And that's historically what our industry has spent dollars and focus and attention on is let's get more candidates in, because more of them that come in, more of them we can place. But that funnel gets smaller as you go down. And if you're not focusing on that redeployment and really, especially the nurturing and the in-between that you guys have all mentioned, it's just a really expensive way to, I hate to say it, and there's still so much value to those tools, but to bloat your ATS, but there's so much value sitting in your ATS that you can really activate and communicate better with your candidates.
Exactly. There's a concept in innovation called Muda, which the Japanese started, where on the assembly line, they said, let's eliminate any waste. And in Japanese, apparently that's Muda. And if you look at that process you just described, that's the issue, is that more candidates equals more work to get to the same result. If you can bring in better candidates at the top that are more engaged with you as a company and as a business, then there's less waste in that process. So the old idea of just funnel all the way through to get to the bottom just was wasteful. And now you have to view it that way and try and really, I'd much rather have a database of 150,000 engaged and connected people than 15 million who don't know who I am compared to anyone else.
Yeah, and the waste there, that time capital is extreme, because you think about all these people that maybe that back out because you didn't build loyalty and trust, or began assignment and then had a better offer, what have you, and didn't communicate with you. All of that additional time lost is so much more than if you just were to get it right the first time and focus on the relationship. I mean, like if only I could quantify that, because there's also the upset that's caused with your client. And so I think, Todd, you said this, it's really this two customer model. I mean, you have to be focused on both customers exactly at the same time to get the optimal result. If you're lopsided in one direction or the other, I mean, that causes just so many inefficiencies. So the word I keep coming back to is trust. And in order to build that trust, I mean, you also have to have technology to build that trust, because you have to have some things that are seamless. Lauren talks about this, the rudimentary repetitive tasks, those need to be done so that you could focus on that very human-centered trust building effort. So you can't do all that without the technology to lift you up.
Lauren, I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is right in your sweet spot.
I know. So I would, companies really need to look at it this way. Revenue generation, that's your sales, that's your net new, that's your, that's your out there collecting all the great candidates. But we also need to have a category of revenue preservation. What are you going to do to preserve the revenue that you have? And your revenue is sitting in your inventory. If I could express to an agency enough, if you had a warehouse full of shoes, right? Because I like shoes, so we'll use shoes, right? If you had a warehouse full of shoes, you would want to sell that inventory. Have you taken stock? And I hate likening people to inventory, so we'll call it your human capital database. Your human capital database. Do you understand what it's comprised of? Have you taken inventory? Have you? And once you've taken inventory, have you now enabled your sales force to go out there and sell what you actually have, as opposed to having a warehouse full of 8.5 shoes, which is my size if anybody's interested in buying me shoes. But you wouldn't have your salespeople out selling 7s now, would you? Because I'd have to do the buying process all over again. It would take me, I'd have to fill up my inventory. I'd have to do all of those things all over again. So why agencies do we think it's a good idea to just go out there and buy, whatever size shoe we want, as opposed to really understanding what does your organization want to generate? There's your revenue generation, right? And then having a methodology of understanding that inventory once it comes in, that human capital once it comes in. You must have a good incoming candidate management process. I worked for an organization that we brought in over 100,000 people in a year's time and responded to 28%. Have you any idea what type of reputational damage that does over time, and how poorly it reflects on our industry? And so to create brand trust, as Brindy's pointed, you can't just disappear. Right. You can't just put the message out there and then Todd, what you experienced, right? Crickets, the cricketorium, as I refer to it, or the black hole abyss where resumes go to die. And so how do we avoid that? And that's treating each individual. You know what? It all starts with empathy, period. End. If every organization's core piece of importance, core mission, vision, and value was to drive their organization leading with empathy. And I know it's an overused terminology post-COVID, but really understanding that looking for a job sucks. You are essentially reaching out to total strangers for acceptance with a piece of paper. How overwhelming is that, and how emotional, and how if we could lead understanding that, I'm telling you, we would make different technology decisions. We would we would understand that more is not better, because we understand that looking for a job is a very scary place to be.
Well, and my mind goes to just the entire process. In the industry as a whole, companies are starting to adopt technology. Some have been doing it for the last number of years, and I don't mean technology. Of course, everybody's been invested in like ATSs for years and years, but like truly investing in automation to say, okay, if we can't do a manual one-to-one connection, but we still need to have connections with all of our candidates and consultants ongoing, how do we automate those pieces? What I'm starting to see the challenge is companies kind of feel that once they have it set up, they're like, cool, we're good. We got the storefront.
What is that?
Check it off. We're good to go. But the reality is to take a step back and say, have you thought, to everything you guys are saying, have you thought about the process? Have you gone through the customer journey process, and defined, to get a little bit marketing nerdy, have you defined what is their process as they engage with your staffing firm, from awareness to consideration, decision, all of those pieces, right? To them being on contract, hopefully then redeploying, and what are they thinking, feeling, and doing at each of those stages, so that the content you provide to them is actually tailored to help move them to the next stage and to support them. Those are the pieces that I'm not seeing many staffing firms do now. And that's an area that Parqa specializes in. And so it's very top of mind for me when we hear staffing firms say, yep, we've been investing in it, go check it out. And you look under the hood and you're like, oof, that is a wall of text. That doesn't actually speak in the voice of your brand. There's no call to action, or you're asking them the same thing every 30 days and there's no response change depending on how they answer you. just approaching it as a human, like that's like the whole premise. And Lauren, maybe you could help us copyright a cool t-shirt, right? Like you're like the queen of t-shirt phrases of basically don't just automate it for the sake of automating it, like automate your best practices, your best
It's that intentionality again, though.
Yes.
If you are just slapping spaghetti against the automation fridge, then it will not reflect your culture. It will not,
Right.
We are not. And that when I have a building your ecosystem exercise, right? And I have executives who get very confused when the first question I ask is, what are your mission, vision, and values?
Mm-hmm.
Those are my first question in building a tech stack. And they're like, I want to build a tech stack. I don't need help with my mission. We don't have those. Okay. Number one, you better figure that out. What is the purpose of your organization? It can't just be to drive, because with the authenticity that people require today, the connection that people need to feel, to feel good about the work that they do, you cannot just not have a purpose.
Right.
You just can't.
Right. It's like putting a boat in the water, but not having a direction of where you're going.
Yeah.
Like, you just want to hang out and enjoy the weather. Great. You're going to accomplish it. But if you want to actually get somewhere, you need your roadmap.
Yeah. You need, what are people connecting to is all that I'm saying. And to look, there's plenty. We have a $14 billion worth of HR tech to wet your palate, to wet your whistle, to make everything better, to automate it, to do all of the things, but to apply them responsibly and apply them with service in mind and apply them with empathy. Those are two very different things.
Well, and I think that that's one of the things the industry is getting wrong. I think that to be touting, we've done 1.8 million automations or 2.5 million or whatever it is, versus could you have done 5 customer journeys that all met the same goal and attached more, right? And so just because you took the job and sent a survey out on time as you're supposed to and did that 600 times doesn't mean you're doing it right. It just means that you've siloed that process away from a human into a tech, but it's still not delivering the end result you're looking for because there's no connection there. And so we have to get better at thinking about NPS at other times than when the NPS survey goes out. I always chuckle when people tell me that their NPS is like higher than Harley Davidson, right? It's like, okay, well, we're to Lauren's point, we're a red velvet company. We only place 1% of the people that come through the doors. Our NPS score should be about 11. So if you're telling me it's 90, you either rigged it or something's not right in the way you're measuring it. And we have to think about that all the time. I think we too often just separate the idea of customer experience and customer interaction to those events of when those surveys go out, or when we're surveying for employee recognition or the Inc. 5000 or whatever it may be, instead of thinking about it all the time so that it's second nature, that you're like, I don't care, test our NPS, it'll be great. I do a great job of customer engagement. I'm not worried about it, right? Instead of siloing it into each line of business.
Yeah. So if I had to bring this all to a semi-tangible takeaway, because this has been such a good conversation, and I think we could go on for another hour. So maybe this will be a future panel or another fireside chat. It sounds to me like the common theme that comes up is, of course, intentionality and empathy. But how do you do that when your business is running 1,000,000 miles an hour? And it's like, if you are listening to this, like, block an hour on your calendar sometime in the next 2 weeks, and whether you're a recruiter, whether you're an owner, whether you're a technology leader, whether you're in marketing, like whatever your role is, there's value that you bring into your insights. So if you can just sit and start mapping out what is your process, like let's say your end goal is to create a better candidate community. And one of the tangible ways to evaluate and assess that is like a better redeployment rate. Let's say, like what is your process start to finish? If you were to tap on the shoulder of your best recruiter, your best salesperson, and say, if I could automate everything you do because you're killing it, like, what is that process? And then start kind of like taking some steps to look to see, do I have a way that makes this smooth and seamless for our entire company?
Because we have a technology roadmap. We have a marketing roadmap. We have, we have our forecast. Why wouldn't we have an experiential roadmap? Why
Yes.
wouldn't we,
Exactly.
why wouldn't we all continually, and we evaluate those every quarter,
Love it.
right? We look at our
Yep.
roadmaps. Are we on point for the technology? Are we on point for our experience roadmap? What is our
Love that.
experience today? And for any business owner who has a website and has an apply process and hasn't their darn selves gotten on there and hit apply now, for shame, for shame, for shame. And I am publicly shaming you. You
But
need
have
to
a way
get
to
on.
improve it. Yeah.
I'm publicly shaming you. Get on your website, apply now, get what that feeling feels like. If you didn't have a job and you were coming to your website today and you hit the apply now, does it make you feel good inside? If it doesn't, reevaluate it.
Right. Or if you are like the most in-demand person because you're, an IT consultant and you have a million candidates, or excuse me, staffing firms hitting you every single day, like what would stand out to you? Like what process would make you feel valued and cared about? Because we all hear the horror stories of what doesn't make candidates feel valued and cared about. So I love that process, or that word, that experience roadmap. And it's so true. Just evaluating soup to nuts. What are my business objectives? What am I trying to accomplish? And what key components from a technology, marketing, operations, culture needs to shift and improve? Because the reality is, even if you're doing it perfect right now, the landscape is going to change in 6 months.
It won't be perfect in 6
Right.
months.
Target.
It is
Like we have
Yes.
fickle consumers,
Yeah.
man, fickle. And they may, they want chat today and they want a bot today because they expect it. Well, tomorrow that may not be okay. And that's why that
Right.
reevaluation, I have
Yes.
businesses all the time go, we did the training. And I'm like, it doesn't just happen once. You don't just put oil in
Yeah.
your car once. You got to keep it running.
Yeah. So evaluate, and all of us are here to nerd out on this. I mean, I don't want to volunteer everyone's time, but like we're clearly passionate about this. So you can find us all on LinkedIn. If you have thoughts that we didn't hit and you'd like to engage just in comments on LinkedIn, like let's do that. Like let's talk about it, because this is certainly not a topic that any one person has squarely figured out for the industry, because the industry is evolving and what people need is evolving. And so we're all just here to try to poke some holes, but help find some solutions to make the whole process better and smoother for those candidate communities. So Lauren, Todd, Brindy, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really fun and vibrant conversation, and I'm so excited to just hear what people think as they listen to this and watch this, and hopefully it spurs on some really fun conversations and things people hadn't thought about in the past. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Watch for the next Fireside Chat coming up soon, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you, Kelli.
Thank you so much.
Parqa.
Thanks, Kelli.
Thank you.